The fluorescent lights in the emergency room cast everything in harsh white. Lincoln Ray carried his 6-year-old daughter through the automatic doors, her small hand pressed against her right ear. Mira hadn't stopped whimpering for the past hour, and her fever had spiked to 102 degrees during the drive. "It hurts, Daddy," she whispered against his shoulder, her voice weak and shaky. Lincoln approached the reception desk, where a tired-looking clerk typed on a computer. The waiting room held the usual collection of late-night emergencies. A teenager with a bloody nose, an elderly man coughing into a tissue, a mother rocking a crying infant. "My daughter has severe ear pain. It started 3 days ago, but got much worse tonight. She also has a fever. Insurance card and ID, please." Lincoln shifted Mira in his arms and pulled out his wallet with one hand. The clerk scanned both cards and handed them back without making eye contact. "Room 7. Nurse will be right with you." The examination room smelled like disinfectant mixed with the anxiety that seemed to permeate every surface. Lincoln set Mira on the paper-covered table. She kicked her legs slowly, wincing each time she moved her head. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her usually bright smile was replaced by a grimace of pain. "Daddy, make it stop. Please. The doctor will fix it, sweetheart. Just like when you had strep throat last year, remember?" Mira nodded weakly. Lincoln pulled a chair close to the examination table and held her hand. At 36, he'd been through enough medical emergencies during his Army service to stay calm under pressure. But seeing his daughter in pain triggered a protective instinct that made his chest tight with worry. The door opened. Lincoln's sister Rena stepped inside wearing navy scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. At 31, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who dealt with medical emergencies every night. Her expression brightened when she saw them, then immediately turned serious as she noticed Myra's condition. "What brings you here?" she asked, washing her hands at the small sink. "Myra's ear started hurting 3 days ago when I was in Portland for the cybersecurity conference. Avery said it wasn't serious, just a minor earache that would clear up on its own. But tonight she started crying and couldn't sleep. The fever spiked about an hour ago." Rena dried her hands and pulled on latex gloves. "Let's take a look, baby girl." She picked up an otoscope from the medical tray and adjusted the light. Mira tilted her head obediently, used to medical examinations from previous ear infections. Rena inserted the scope gently into her ear canal, her movements practiced and gentle. Her expression changed immediately. The professional calm she always maintained cracked, replaced by something Lincoln had rarely seen in his sister's face: alarm. "Lincoln, I need to get Dr. Martinez. Don't move her. Don't let her shake her head or touch her ear." She left the room quickly, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. Lincoln felt his chest tighten. Rena had been an ER nurse for 8 years. She'd seen everything from car accidents to drug overdoses. She never looked worried. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Aunt Rena just wants to make sure we get the best doctor to look at your ear." 5 minutes felt like an hour. When the door opened again, Rena returned with a middle-aged ENT specialist wearing wire-rimmed glasses and a serious expression. Dr. Martinez moved with the deliberate precision of someone who'd spent decades dealing with delicate procedures. "Mr. Ray, I'm Dr. Martinez. Your sister asked me to examine your daughter." He washed his hands thoroughly and put on fresh gloves before examining Myra's ear with his own equipment. Lincoln watched the doctor's face as he adjusted the scope several times, looking deeper into the ear canal. Dr. Martinez frowned and switched to a different attachment. "There's a foreign object deep in the canal," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "We need to remove it immediately. It's causing significant inflammation and could damage her eardrum if left in place much longer." "What kind of object?" Lincoln asked, though something cold was already spreading through his chest. "I can't tell from this angle. We'll know more once I extract it. The procedure will take about 20 minutes. She'll need local anesthetic." Lincoln looked at Mira, who was watching the adults with wide eyes. "Will it hurt?" "We'll make sure you don't feel anything, honey," Dr. Martinez said gently. "But you need to stay very still while I work." The removal procedure was meticulous and tense. Mira lay on her side, while Dr. Martinez worked with tiny forceps and a suction device. Despite the local anesthetic, she cried softly during parts of the procedure. Lincoln held her hand and talked to her about her favorite cartoon characters, trying to distract her from what was happening. "Almost done, sweetheart. You're being so brave." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Martinez straightened up. In his forceps was a small, cylindrical object about the size of a pencil eraser. He placed it carefully in a sterile metal tray. Lincoln stared at it. The object was white plastic with what looked like a tiny circuit board visible through a clear section. It definitely wasn't a natural foreign body like a bead or piece of food that children sometimes put in their ears. "This isn't debris," Renna said, picking up the object with tweezers and examining it under the examination light. "Someone put this there." Deliberately. Dr. Martinez nodded grimly as he cleaned Myra's ear canal. This was intentionally inserted, not by accident, not something a child could do themselves. The positioning required deliberate placement by someone with knowledge of ear anatomy. Lincoln's stomach dropped. "What are you saying exactly?" "Someone inserted this device into your daughter's ear canal. Given the depth and the precise angle of insertion, it had to be done by an adult with some medical knowledge or training." Lincoln looked at Mira, who was rubbing her ear gently with a confused expression. She seemed relieved that the pressure was gone, but clearly didn't understand the implications of what had been found. "Sweetheart, do you remember anyone touching your ear recently? Anyone besides doctors?" Mira nodded without hesitation. "Nana played doctor with me. She had the little flashlight like the real doctor. She looked at my ears and my mouth." The room went completely silent except for the hum of medical equipment. Lincoln felt the temperature drop 10 degrees. "Tell me about when Nana played doctor," Lincoln said, keeping his voice calm despite the rage building in his chest. "She said she was checking if I was sick, like when I go to my real doctor. She had the flashlight, and she looked at my ears for a long time." "Did she put anything in your ear?" Mira thought for a moment. Her small face scrunched in concentration. "She had a little white thing. Said it was special medicine and it would help me hear better. Like vitamins, but for ears." Lincoln's hands slowly clenched into fists. "Did it hurt when she put it in?" "A little. But Nana said brave girls don't cry about medicine. She said it was important for helping Daddy understand me better." Dr. Martinez and Renna exchanged glances. The implications were becoming clearer. "Nana?" Dr. Martinez asked. "My mother-in-law," Lincoln said quietly. "Judith Caldwell." Renna met his eyes. Her expression was stone serious. "Lincoln, you need to file a police report immediately. This is child endangerment at minimum, possibly criminal surveillance." Dr. Martinez finished cleaning Myra's ear and prescribed antibiotic drops for the inflammation. "The tissue damage will heal in a few days with proper care. But this object could have caused permanent hearing loss if left in place much longer. Your daughter was very lucky." He handed Lincoln a medical report documenting the foreign object and its removal. "You'll need this for the police report." Lincoln carried Mira to his truck in the parking lot. She fell asleep in her car seat before he started the engine, exhausted from the medical procedure and the pain medication Dr. Martinez had given her. He sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, staring at the small plastic bag containing the object. His phone buzzed with a text message. "Avery, how is she? Sorry I couldn't come. Had a terrible migraine and took medication." Lincoln didn't respond immediately. Avery and her mother had watched Mira for 3 days while he attended a cybersecurity conference in Portland. He'd returned home that afternoon to find Mira complaining about her ear, but Avery had insisted it was just a minor infection that would clear up on its own. Now he wondered what else had happened during those 3 days. The drive home took 15 minutes through empty suburban streets. Springfield at 2 a.m. was quiet and peaceful, with most houses dark except for porch lights and the occasional glow of a television through drawn curtains. Lincoln parked in his driveway and carried Mira inside, noting that Avery's car was in the garage. Their house was a modest 2-story colonial with white siding and black shutters. Avery had picked it out 4 years ago when his promotion to senior systems architect made the mortgage affordable. She'd wanted something in the best school district with good resale value in proximity to her mother's house. The interior was decorated in Avery's preferred style, neutral colors, expensive furniture that looked good but wasn't particularly comfortable, and carefully arranged accessories that suggested success and good taste. Everything had its place, and Mira had been trained from an early age not to disturb the order. Avery was asleep in their bedroom when Lincoln tucked Mira into her bed. The nightlight cast cartoon butterflies on the walls, one of the few child-friendly touches Avery had allowed in the house. Mira stirred as he pulled the covers up to her chin. "Daddy." "Yes, baby. Will Nana play doctor again?" Lincoln's jaw tightened. "No, she won't." "Good. It made my ear hurt." Lincoln kissed her forehead and watched her fall back asleep. His daughter trusted him to keep her safe, and he'd failed. For 3 days, she'd been in pain because of something deliberately done to her by someone who claimed to love her. That would never happen again. That he went downstairs to his home office and turned on his computer. As a senior systems architect for a defense contractor, Lincoln understood technology better than most people. He specialized in cybersecurity and had security clearance that gave him access to sophisticated analysis tools. That he placed the plastic object under his desk lamp and examined it closely with a magnifying glass. The circuit board was more sophisticated than he'd initially realized. This wasn't some cheap surveillance device ordered online. The components were high quality: a microtransmitter, a small lithium battery, and what appeared to be a memory chip with significant storage capacity. Lincoln photographed the object from multiple angles using a macro lens, capturing details of the circuit board and the plastic housing. He uploaded the high-resolution images to his SecureWorks server and ran them through image analysis software that could identify electronic components. The results were disturbing. The transmitter was military-grade, designed for covert operations. The memory chip could store hours of audio recordings. The battery was designed to last for weeks. This wasn't a toy or medical device. It was professional surveillance equipment. Lincoln opened an encrypted messaging app and sent the photos to his former Army contact, Troy Vance, who now worked in military intelligence at Fort Bragg. Troy had served in the same Signal Corps unit and knew more about communications equipment than almost anyone in the service. The response came back within an hour, despite the late time. "Call me immediately." Secure line. Lincoln dialed Troy's encrypted number. "Jesus Christ, Lincoln, where did you find this?" "In my daughter's ear canal. Doctor removed it tonight." This is a modified short-range data recorder. Military surplus equipment that's been customized for civilian surveillance. Whoever did this work knew exactly what they were doing. What does it record? Audio primarily, but this model can pick up conversations from across a room. The microphone is incredibly sensitive. It activates when it detects sound above a certain threshold and stores everything until it can transmit. Lincoln felt his anger building into something cold and focused. What does it transmit? Wi-Fi connection. It searches for available networks and uploads stored files. When it finds a connection, it's programmed to access. This is sophisticated stuff, Lincoln, not something you buy on Amazon. How do I trace it? Give me 12 hours to run the components through our database. I'll identify the manufacturer and see if we can trace the modifications. But Lincoln, whoever made this, had access to classified surveillance technology. This isn't amateur hour. After hanging up, Lincoln accessed his home network logs. Every device that connected to his Wi-Fi network left a digital fingerprint in the router's memory. He pulled up 3 weeks of connection data and started analyzing the patterns. There it was. An unknown device with a unique MAC address had attempted to connect to his network multiple times over the past 3 days. Always during evening hours. Always when Mira was in the house. Lincoln cross-referenced the connection attempts with his family schedules. The device had tried to sync every time Mira entered the house after school, during dinner, and before bedtime. It was recording her conversations with him and trying to upload them to someone's server. But why? What could a 6-year-old conversations possibly contain that someone would want to record? Unless the target wasn't Mira. Unless someone wanted to record Lincoln's private moments with his daughter. His unguarded conversations when he thought they were alone. His expressions of love, his parenting decisions, his emotional vulnerability. Someone was building a profile of him as a father. Lincoln heard footsteps on the stairs. Avery appeared in the doorway wearing a silk robe, her blonde hair messy from sleep. Even without makeup and disheveled from sleep, she was beautiful in the way that drew attention wherever they went. But something in her expression seemed calculating, as if she was measuring his reaction. "How is Mira?" Doctor removed a foreign object from her ear. Avery's face showed what appeared to be genuine concern. "What kind of object?" Lincoln studied his wife's expression carefully. They'd been married for 8 years, together for 10. He'd learned to read her tells during countless poker games with friends and family discussions where she carefully managed the narrative. Electronic surveillance device. Someone put it there deliberately. "That's terrible. Who would do such a thing to a child?" Mira said your mother played doctor with her while I was in Portland. Avery's face went pale, but Lincoln couldn't tell if it was from shock or fear of discovery. "That's ridiculous. Mom loves Mira. She would never hurt her." The doctor confirmed it was intentionally placed deep in her ear canal. Mira specifically mentioned Judith using a flashlight and putting something in her ear that was supposed to help her hear better. "Myra's 6 years old, Lincoln. Children that age have vivid imaginations. She probably confused different events." Lincoln turned back to his computer screen. "The police want to interview both of you tomorrow." "Police?" Avery's voice rose slightly. "You're calling the police on my mother?" "Someone inserted a sophisticated recording device into our daughter's ear canal. That's child endangerment and illegal surveillance. It's a felony." Avery sat down in the chair across from his desk, pulling her robe tighter around herself. "Lincoln, please think about this rationally. Mom loves Mira more than anything. She would never intentionally hurt her." Then explain the device. "Maybe Mira picked it up somewhere and it got stuck accidentally. You know how curious she is about small objects." Lincoln pulled up the technical specifications Troy had sent him. This device was manufactured specifically for covert surveillance operations. It's not a toy or piece of debris a child would find. Avery was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence on his computer screen. "What did the police say when you called them?" "I haven't called them yet. I wanted to understand what we're dealing with first." "Good, because I think you're overreacting to something that probably has an innocent explanation." Lincoln looked at his wife more carefully. Avery was intelligent and socially skilled in ways that had always impressed him. She could read people instantly, adapt her personality to fit any situation, and convince almost anyone to see things her way. These were qualities he'd admired when they were dating and early in their marriage. Now he wondered if those same skills were being used against him. "Someone used our daughter as a recording device, Avery. I'm not overreacting." She stood up and tightened her robe. "I'm going back to bed. We can discuss this tomorrow when you're thinking more clearly and not jumping to conspiracy theories." After she left, Lincoln returned to his investigation. He pulled up the metadata from the device's connection attempts. Each attempt included signal strength data, which he could use to triangulate where the device had been located within his house. The recordings had been made primarily in 3 locations: Myra's bedroom, the living room where they watched TV together, and the kitchen table where they ate breakfast and dinner. All places where Lincoln spent one-on-one time with his daughter, away from Avery's presence. Someone wanted to record his private conversations with Mira. His parenting style, his emotional responses, his unguarded moments. Someone was building a case against him. Over the next 2 weeks, Lincoln began noticing patterns in his family's routine that he'd previously overlooked. Avery had been taking Mira to what she called therapy sessions every Tuesday and Thursday while he was at work. Sessions he'd never authorized, never been consulted about, and never been told about in detail. When he asked Avery about them, her answers were frustratingly vague. Just some developmental support. Nothing major. What kind of developmental support? For what condition? Speech therapy and social skills. You know how quiet Mira gets around strangers. She's naturally shy. That's normal for 6-year-olds. Mrs. Peterson at school suggested it might help her confidence. But when Lincoln called Myra's school the next day, Mrs. Peterson seemed genuinely surprised by his question. "Therapy? I've never suggested anything like that for Mira. She's one of my most well-adjusted students. Quiet, yes, but that's just her personality. She participates in class activities, gets along well with other children, and her academic progress is excellent." You've never expressed concerns about her social development? Not at all. Mira is exactly where she should be developmentally. I'm not sure where you got the impression that I recommended therapy. Lincoln thanked the teacher and hung up, feeling the first real crack in his trust of Avery's explanations. If the school hadn't recommended therapy, why was Mira receiving it? And why had Avery lied about the referral source? That evening, Lincoln started digging deeper into their family's medical and financial records. He accessed their health insurance portal and found claims for multiple therapy sessions with Dr. Rebecca Chan, a child psychiatrist who specialized in trauma and behavioral disorders. The session notes were extensive and deeply disturbing. According to Dr. Chen's reports, Mira exhibited selective mutism and auditory hallucinations consistent with chronic environmental stress. The notes described a child who became withdrawn and anxious when her father was present, showing concerning attachment disruption patterns and trauma responses indicative of emotional abuse. Lincoln read the reports twice, unable to reconcile the description with the happy, talkative daughter he knew. Mira ran to him every evening when he came home from work. She insisted on reading bedtime stories together. She asked him endless questions about his job, his childhood, and anything else that crossed her mind. The child described in these reports was a stranger. He read further. Dr. Chen's recommendations included immediate evaluation of the home environment and consideration of temporary separation from stress-inducing family members. The final report recommended supervised visitation pending comprehensive psychological evaluation of all family members. Someone was building a professional case to remove Mira from his custody. Lincoln accessed Avery's laptop using the admin privileges he maintained on their home network. In her email folder, he found correspondence that made his blood run cold. Email after email to family lawyers, all dating from the past month. The lawyers discussed custody arrangements, asset division, and strategies for building cases of parental unfitness. One email chain included detailed discussions of evidence gathering and timeline management. Avery needed comprehensive documentation of emotional abuse patterns. Audio recordings would significantly strengthen your position. Family courts favor mothers, but evidence is crucial for full custody and maximum asset protection. Schedule consultation next week. Rebecca Martinez, Family Law and Other email, sent 2 weeks earlier. Mrs. Ray, your mother's request for psychiatric evaluation has been approved. Dr. Chin will conduct assessment of child's trauma responses and recommend custody modifications. Appointment scheduled for Thursday. Documentation should support your concerns about father's emotional fitness. Family Services Lincoln checked his calendar. Thursday was 3 days ago when he'd been in Portland for the cybersecurity conference. Avery had taken Mira to see a psychiatrist without his knowledge, consent, or presence, but he found the appointment confirmation in Avery's deleted emails folder. Dr. Chin specialized in childhood trauma and parental stress disorders. Her practice focused on custody evaluations and child protection cases. The appointment notes, which Avery had saved to her laptop, contained fabrications that made Lincoln feel physically sick. Child exhibits pronounced symptoms of selective mutism and auditory processing disorders consistent with chronic emotional stress. Mother reports father's anger management issues, emotional unavailability, and concerning behavioral patterns around the child. Patient becomes noticeably withdrawn and anxious when father is mentioned. Physical stress responses include trembling and difficulty maintaining eye contact. Recommend immediate supervised visitation pending full psychological evaluation of father. Child safety and emotional well-being require protection from continued exposure to father's destabilizing presence. Every word was a lie. But it was an official document in Myra's medical file, written by a licensed psychiatrist, and would carry significant weight in any custody proceeding. Lincoln discovered that Avery had been secretly recording some of these therapy sessions. He found audio files on her laptop organized by date and session number. But when he listened to them, he realized they'd been heavily edited. The recordings made him sound harsh, dismissive, and emotionally cold when talking to Mira. His responses were taken completely out of context, with Myra's questions and comments removed to make his words seem cruel or rejecting. In one edited clip, he heard himself saying, "Stop asking me that." But he remembered the actual conversation clearly. Mira had been repeatedly asking if she could have ice cream for breakfast, and he'd been playfully telling her to stop asking because the answer would always be no. They'd been laughing together. The edited version made him sound angry and rejecting toward a child asking an innocent question. Another clip contained him saying, "That's not how we do things in this house." In reality, he'd been explaining why they couldn't have pizza for dinner 3 nights in a row because they needed balanced nutrition. In the edited version, it sounded like harsh criticism of Myra's preferences. Every recording had been manipulated to remove context and make him appear to be an emotionally abusive father. Lincoln's investigation into the family finances revealed more disturbing evidence. 2 weeks earlier, Avery had opened a medical trust fund in Myra's name using $5,000 from their joint savings account. She'd done this without discussion or his knowledge. The fund was supposedly for treatment of developmental and auditory processing disorders. But Mira didn't have any such disorders. Her pediatrician had never diagnosed any conditions requiring ongoing treatment. Lincoln traced the withdrawals from the trust fund. $1,500 had been paid to Caldwell Consulting Services, a business registered to Judith Caldwell's home address. The business description listed family therapy and child development consulting. His mother-in-law had no professional qualifications in therapy or child development. She was billing fraudulent consulting fees against money taken from his family's savings. Another $1,000 had been paid to legal consultation fees with Rebecca Martinez's law firm. Avery was using their joint savings to pay for lawyers who were helping her plan to take Mira away from him. Lincoln installed hidden security cameras throughout the house that weekend while Avery took Mira shopping for school clothes. As a cybersecurity expert, he had access to professional-grade surveillance equipment through his company's security contracts, and he placed tiny, wireless cameras in the living room, kitchen, and hallway outside Myra's bedroom. The cameras were motion-activated and uploaded footage to an encrypted cloud server that only Lincoln could access. The video quality was HD and the audio was crystal clear. Lincoln tested the system thoroughly to ensure the cameras were invisible and the recordings would be legally admissible if needed. He was careful to place them only in common areas of the house, avoiding bedrooms and bathrooms where privacy expectations would make surveillance problematic. Within a week, the cameras captured something that destroyed any remaining trust Lincoln had in his wife. He was upstairs helping Mira with her bath on Wednesday evening when motion sensors triggered an alert on his phone. Lincoln quietly activated the live camera feed and watched Avery in the living room, talking to someone via video call on her laptop. The camera angle was perfect. He could see both Avery's face and her laptop screen clearly. The man she was talking to had graying hair, hard features, and the bearing of someone who'd spent years in military service. Lincoln recognized him immediately. Kellen Roach. Lincoln activated the audio recording feature and listened to their conversation with growing fury. "The therapy sessions are building a solid foundation," Avery said. "Dr. Chun thinks we have enough documentation for an emergency custody motion. Timeline: next week. My lawyer says family courts move quickly when there's documented evidence of emotional abuse and expert psychiatric testimony. Good. Your husband destroyed my career 6 years ago. Time to return the favor. I still feel bad about involving Mira in this. Kids are resilient. She'll adapt to whatever custody arrangement you get. The important thing is getting you full control and making him pay for what he did to me. What about the recordings from the device in her ear? Already delivered them to your lawyer. I edited them to highlight his anger issues and emotional distance. The kid sounds scared and withdrawn in the final versions." Lincoln's hands clenched into fists. The recordings were completely fabricated, edited to remove context and add audio that made Mira sound frightened of him. "When do I get the rest of the payment?" Kellen asked. "After the custody order is finalized. $20,000 total like we agreed. Worth every penny to watch that bastard lose everything that matters to him. He's getting suspicious. Started asking more questions about the therapy appointments. Doesn't matter. Once you file the emergency motion, he'll be playing defense. Courts don't give accused abusers the benefit of the doubt. What if he has evidence that contradicts our claims? What evidence could he have? You've been careful about what you say around him. The therapy reports are official medical documents. The edited recordings sound authentic. His own mother-in-law will testify about concerning behavior she witnessed. My mother understands what's at stake. Good, because if this plan fails, we're both in serious trouble. Falsifying medical records and filing fraudulent court documents are federal crimes. It won't fail. Family courts are biased toward mothers, especially when children's safety is involved. The video call ended. Avery closed her laptop and walked upstairs, passing the camera with a satisfied expression. Lincoln sat in the bathroom, processing what he'd just witnessed. His wife and Kellen Roach were engaged in a criminal conspiracy to frame him as an abusive father. They'd used his daughter as an unwitting recording device, falsified medical records, and were planning to perjure themselves in court, all to destroy his life and take Mira away from him. "Daddy, can we read 3 books tonight?" Mira asked from the bathtub. "Of course, sweetheart," Lincoln replied, his voice carefully controlled. "We can read as many as you want." The appointment notes, which Avery had saved to her laptop, contained fabrications that made Lincoln feel physically sick. Child exhibits pronounced symptoms of selective mutism and auditory processing disorders consistent with chronic emotional stress. Mother reports father's anger management issues, emotional unavailability, and concerning behavioral patterns around the child. Patient becomes noticeably withdrawn and anxious when father is mentioned. Physical stress responses include trembling and difficulty maintaining eye contact. Recommend immediate supervised visitation pending full psychological evaluation of father. Child safety and emotional well-being require protection from continued exposure to father's destabilizing presence. Every word was a lie. But it was an official document in Myra's medical file, written by a licensed psychiatrist, and would carry significant weight in any custody proceeding. Lincoln discovered that Avery had been secretly recording some of these therapy sessions. He found audio files on her laptop organized by date and session number. But when he listened to them, he realized they'd been heavily edited. The recordings made him sound harsh, dismissive, and emotionally cold when talking to Mira. His responses were taken completely out of context, with Myra's questions and comments removed to make his words seem cruel or rejecting. In one edited clip, he heard himself saying, "Stop asking me that." But he remembered the actual conversation clearly. Mira had been repeatedly asking if she could have ice cream for breakfast, and he'd been playfully telling her to stop asking because the answer would always be no. They'd been laughing together. The edited version made him sound angry and rejecting toward a child asking an innocent question. Another clip contained him saying, "That's not how we do things in this house." In reality, he'd been explaining why they couldn't have pizza for dinner 3 nights in a row because they needed balanced nutrition. In the edited version, it sounded like harsh criticism of Myra's preferences. Every recording had been manipulated to remove context and make him appear to be an emotionally abusive father. Lincoln's investigation into the family finances revealed more disturbing evidence. 2 weeks earlier, Avery had opened a medical trust fund in Myra's name using $5,000 from their joint savings account. She'd done this without discussion or his knowledge. The fund was supposedly for treatment of developmental and auditory processing disorders. But Mira didn't have any such disorders. Her pediatrician had never diagnosed any conditions requiring ongoing treatment. Lincoln traced the withdrawals from the trust fund. $1,500 had been paid to Caldwell Consulting Services, a business registered to Judith Caldwell's home address. The business description listed family therapy and child development consulting. His mother-in-law had no professional qualifications in therapy or child development. She was billing fraudulent consulting fees against money taken from his family's savings. Another $1,000 had been paid to legal consultation fees with Rebecca Martinez's law firm. Avery was using their joint savings to pay for lawyers who were helping her plan to take Mira away from him. Lincoln installed hidden security cameras throughout the house that weekend while Avery took Mira shopping for school clothes. As a cybersecurity expert, he had access to professional-grade surveillance equipment through his company's security contracts and he placed tiny, wireless cameras in the living room, kitchen, and hallway outside Myra's bedroom. The cameras were motion-activated and uploaded footage to an encrypted cloud server that only Lincoln could access. The video quality was HD and the audio was crystal clear. Lincoln tested the system thoroughly to ensure the cameras were invisible and the recordings would be legally admissible if needed. He was careful to place them only in common areas of the house, avoiding bedrooms and bathrooms where privacy expectations would make surveillance problematic. Within a week, the cameras captured something that destroyed any remaining trust Lincoln had in his wife. He was upstairs helping Mira with her bath on Wednesday evening when motion sensors triggered an alert on his phone. Lincoln quietly activated the live camera feed and watched Avery in the living room, talking to someone via video call on her laptop. The camera angle was perfect. He could see both Avery's face and her laptop screen clearly. The man she was talking to had graying hair, hard features, and the bearing of someone who'd spent years in military service. Lincoln recognized him immediately. Kellen Roach. Lincoln activated the audio recording feature and listened to their conversation with growing fury. The therapy sessions are building a solid foundation, Avery said. Dr. Chun thinks we have enough documentation for an emergency custody motion. Timeline. Next week. My lawyer says family courts move quickly when there's documented evidence of emotional abuse and expert psychiatric testimony. Good. Your husband destroyed my career 6 years ago. Time to return the favor. I still feel bad about involving Mira in this. Kids are resilient. She'll adapt to whatever custody arrangement you get. The important thing is getting you full control and making him pay for what he did to me. What about the recordings from the device in her ear? Already delivered them to your lawyer. I edited them to highlight his anger issues and emotional distance. The kid sounds scared and withdrawn in the final versions. Lincoln's hands clenched into fists. The recordings were completely fabricated, edited to remove context and add audio that made Mira sound frightened of him. When do I get the rest of the payment? Kellen asked. After the custody order is finalized. $20,000 total like we agreed. Worth every penny to watch that bastard lose everything that matters to him. He's getting suspicious. Started asking more questions about the therapy appointments. Doesn't matter. Once you file the emergency motion, he'll be playing defense. Courts don't give accused abusers the benefit of the doubt. What if he has evidence that contradicts our claims? What evidence could he have? You've been careful about what you say around him. The therapy reports are official medical documents. The edited recordings sound authentic. His own mother-in-law will testify about concerning behavior she witnessed. My mother understands what's at stake. Good, because if this plan fails, we're both in serious trouble. Falsifying medical records and filing fraudulent court documents are federal crimes. It won't fail. Family courts are biased toward mothers, especially when children's safety is involved. The video call ended. Avery closed her laptop and walked upstairs, passing the camera with a satisfied expression. Lincoln sat in the bathroom, processing what he'd just witnessed. His wife and Kellen Roach were engaged in a criminal conspiracy to frame him as an abusive father. They'd used his daughter as an unwitting recording device, falsified medical records, and were planning to perjure themselves in court, all to destroy his life and take Mira away from him. Daddy, can we read 3 books tonight? Mira asked from the bathtub. Of course, sweetheart, Lincoln replied, his voice carefully controlled. We can read as many as you want. But his mind was racing. He now had direct evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and perjury. The challenge would be gathering enough admissible evidence to counter their plan before they executed it. He had to move fast. The next morning, Lincoln called his neighbor Marshall Pike while Avery was at her yoga class. Marshall was a divorced HVAC technician in his early 40s who'd been through his own brutal custody battle 5 years earlier. He'd lost primary custody of his 2 sons despite being a devoted father, largely because his ex-wife had been more skilled at manipulating the family court system. Marshall, I need advice about family court procedures and custody battles. What's going on, buddy? Lincoln explained the situation without mentioning the surveillance evidence. He described the falsified therapy reports, the unauthorized medical trust fund, and his suspicions about a conspiracy involving his mother-in-law. Marshall listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timelines and documentation. Lincoln, you're in serious trouble. If she files first with psychiatric documentation and expert testimony, you'll be playing defense for months. Family courts err on the side of caution when children's safety is allegedly at risk. What can I do? 3 things immediately. First, get your own family law attorney today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Second, document everything you can about your normal interactions with Mira. Video, photos, witnesses who can testify about your relationship with her. Third, preserve any evidence you have of her schemes, but make sure you obtain it legally. What do you mean legally? If you obtained evidence through illegal surveillance or hacking, it won't be admissible in court. Worse, it could be used against you to show you're unstable or paranoid. You need clean evidence or independent corroboration of everything. Lincoln thanked Marshall and immediately called Rebecca Martinez's law office. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was contacting the same attorney Avery had consulted, but Martinez had a reputation as the best family lawyer in the county. I need an emergency consultation about a custody matter. Today, if possible. Mr. Ray, I should inform you that your wife consulted with our office several weeks ago. We may have a conflict of interest. She consulted with you about filing false charges against me. I have evidence of fraud and conspiracy. There was a pause. Can you be here at 2 p.m.? I'll be there. Lincoln spent the morning gathering documentation. Financial records showing the fraudulent trust fund, medical records showing Myra's normal development, school reports confirming no behavioral concerns, and character references from colleagues and friends. He also called Troy Vance for an update on the surveillance device analysis. I've got bad news and worse news, Troy said. The device definitely came from Kellen Roach. We traced the modifications to equipment he stole before his discharge. The worst news is that he's been running a private surveillance operation targeting military families. What kind of operation? Revenge schemes against people who testified against him or contributed to his discharge. You're not his first target. Lincoln, he's been doing this for years. Any evidence of his current activities? We're building a federal case. Should have enough for an arrest warrant within the week. But that might not help your immediate custody situation. Lincoln thanked Troy and prepared for his meeting with Rebecca Martinez. He had evidence of conspiracy and fraud, but he needed to present it in a way that would convince a family court judge to see through Avery's manipulation. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Avery's plan succeeded, he would lose his daughter and possibly face criminal charges based on fabricated evidence. But Lincoln had spent 8 years in the Army and 12 years in cybersecurity. He understood warfare, whether it involved enemy soldiers or family court proceedings. Avery and Kellen had made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated their opponent. That afternoon, Lincoln met with Rebecca Martinez in her downtown office. The family law specialist was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd built her reputation handling high-conflict custody cases involving wealthy families and complex financial situations. Mr. Ray, I've reviewed the consultation notes from your wife's visit. She presented a very different version of your family situation. What did she tell you? That you have anger management issues, that your daughter shows signs of trauma, and that she fears for the child's emotional safety. She wanted advice on filing for emergency custody. Lincoln handed her the folder of evidence he'd assembled. Everything she told you is fabricated. Martinez spent 30 minutes reviewing the documents. Financial records showing fraudulent use of savings, medical records showing Myra's normal development, school reports confirming no behavioral issues, and character references from colleagues and neighbors. This is substantial evidence of fraud, Martinez said. But family courts are cautious about accusations and counter-accusations between divorcing spouses. We'll need more than financial irregularities to convince a judge. I have proof of criminal conspiracy. Lincoln explained his discovery of communications between Avery and Kellen Roach, their plan to file false charges, and the systematic falsification of medical and psychiatric records. That's very serious. But how did you obtain this information? Lincoln hesitated. The surveillance recordings were his strongest evidence, but Martinez had warned about illegal evidence gathering. I installed security cameras in my own home to protect my family. The recordings show my wife coordinating with a former military colleague to frame me. Oregon is a two-party consent state for recording private conversations. If your wife didn't know she was being recorded, the audio might not be admissible, but she was planning to commit perjury and fraud. Doesn't matter legally. We need to focus on evidence we can definitely use in court. Martinez explained the legal strategy they would need. File their own emergency motion first, with documentation of fraud and endangerment. Request immediate investigation of the falsified medical records. Subpoena financial records showing misuse of family funds. I can have this ready to file first thing Monday morning. But Mr. Ray, once we file, this becomes a war. Your wife will respond aggressively, and family court battles can be brutal. She started this war when she put a surveillance device in my daughter's ear. Then we'll finish it. Monday morning arrived with the weight of everything Lincoln had worked for hanging in the balance. He'd spent the weekend documenting every interaction with Mira, gathering character witnesses, and preparing for what Martinez warned would be a protracted legal battle. But when he arrived at Martinez's office at 7 a.m., she had urgent news. They filed first. Your wife submitted an emergency motion at 8 p.m. Friday evening, requesting immediate custody and a restraining order. Lincoln felt the ground shift beneath him. What does that mean? You're being served this morning. The motion claims you're emotionally abusive and potentially dangerous to your daughter. It includes psychiatric evaluation, edited audio recordings, and sworn statements from your mother-in-law. Martinez handed him a copy of the legal filing. Lincoln read through claims that painted him as an unstable father who terrorized his own child. The evidence included Dr. Chen's falsified reports, edited recordings that made him sound angry and rejecting, and Judith Caldwell's statement claiming she'd witnessed concerning episodes of verbal aggression. Judge Henderson signed a temporary restraining order based on the emergency nature of the allegations. You have to vacate the family home by 6 p.m. today. Your wife gets interim custody pending a hearing next week. Lincoln stared at the papers. They're taking Mira away from me based on lies. I'm afraid so, but we're filing our counter-motion immediately with all the fraud evidence. This isn't over, Mr. Ray. At 9:30 a.m., a process server arrived at Lincoln's office with the official documents. His colleagues watched as he was handed papers that legally barred him from his own home and his daughter. The drive home felt surreal. Lincoln had spent years protecting classified government systems from foreign threats. Now he was being defeated by his own wife using forged documents and manufactured evidence. Avery was waiting when he arrived, sitting in the living room with a satisfied expression. Lincoln, I'm sorry it came to this. You're stealing my daughter using lies. I'm protecting Mira from a father who's become increasingly unstable and emotionally abusive by conspiring with Kellen Roach and fabricating evidence. Avery's confident expression flickered. I don't know what you're talking about. I know about your partnership with him, Avery. The surveillance equipment, the edited recordings, the fraudulent medical reports. All of it. You've been spying on me. Her voice carried mock outrage, but Lincoln could see fear underneath. I've been protecting my family from criminals trying to destroy it. Just pack your things and leave, Lincoln. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Lincoln went upstairs and packed a suitcase, knowing that Mira would come home from school to find her father gone and no explanation that made sense. The betrayal cut deeper than anything he'd experienced in combat, where at least the enemies were honest about their intentions. That evening, Lincoln stayed at Rena's apartment, feeling like a refugee in his own life. His sister listened to the full story with growing anger. This is insane. You're the best father I know. Mira adores you. Doesn't matter. Avery got there first with official-looking evidence. Family courts err on the side of caution. What's your lawyer's plan? File a counter-motion with fraud evidence. Try to get a hearing as soon as possible. But it could take weeks. What about Mira? Lincoln's voice broke slightly. I can't see her unsupervised until the court hearing. Avery wins this round. Rena was quiet for several minutes. Then she straightened up with the determined expression Lincoln remembered from their childhood. Not if I can help it. I have connections in the medical community. If Dr. Chun falsified records, other doctors will know about it. The next day, Rena began her own investigation. As an ER nurse with 8 years of experience, she knew doctors, psychiatrists, and medical administrators throughout the region. She started with Dr. Chen's colleagues at the psychiatric practice. Casual conversations during shift changes and professional conferences revealed that Dr. Chun had been struggling with gambling debts and had been taking questionable cases for extra income. Rebecca's been doing a lot of custody evaluations lately, one psychiatrist told Rena. More than usual, and she's been less careful about her documentation standards. Rena arranged to meet Dr. Chun at a coffee shop near the hospital, presenting herself as Myra's aunt seeking clarification about her niece's diagnosis. Dr. Chun, I'm concerned about my niece's condition. The reports mention selective mutism and auditory hallucinations, but I've never observed these symptoms. Dr. Chun looked distinctly uncomfortable. I shouldn't discuss patient information with family members without proper authorization. Her father is my brother. He's fighting for custody, and the reports don't match the child I know. Myra is happy, talkative, and shows no signs of trauma or developmental issues. Look, I was hired to provide specific documentation. The mother was very clear about what she needed for her legal case. You mean she told you what to write? Dr. Chun stood up abruptly. I can't continue this conversation. But as she left, she dropped her business card on the table. On the back, she'd written in shaky handwriting, "Call me tonight." I can't be part of this anymore. That evening, Dr. Chun called Rena from her home. I need to come forward about the evaluation. Mrs. Ray pressured me to diagnose conditions that weren't present. She provided edited recordings and coached responses to support predetermined conclusions. Will you provide a written statement? I'll do more than that. I'll testify that the evaluation was compromised and my conclusions were based on falsified evidence. Meanwhile, Marshall Pike made his own contribution to Lincoln's defense. Marshall had doorbell cameras that captured the street in front of both their houses, recording 24/7 for security purposes. I've been thinking about your situation, Marshall told Lincoln. Your wife's claiming Myra is afraid of you and shows signs of trauma. But my cameras show something different. Marshall reviewed weeks of footage from his security system. The video clearly showed Avery dropping Myra off at daycare and school every morning, with Myra skipping happily to the car and hugging Lincoln goodbye on weekends when he drove her places. This contradicts every claim in her motion, Lincoln said as they watched the footage. That's what I figured. Kid looks happy and excited to see you every single day. The video evidence was particularly powerful because it was recorded by a neutral third party with no stake in the custody battle. It showed normal, loving interactions between father and daughter over an extended period. Lincoln's evidence dossier was growing. Surveillance footage of Avery coaching Myra to lie about her father's financial records, showing fraudulent use of trust funds technical analysis, tracing the surveillance device to Kellen Roach Dr. Chen's affidavit retracting her false psychiatric evaluation. Marshall's doorbell camera footage showing normal family interactions. Bank records documenting payments to Kellen for conspiracy services. Troy Vance's military intelligence report on Kellen's criminal activities, but Lincoln still had to wait 3 more days for the custody hearing. 3 more nights of not being able to read Myra bedtime stories or check on her when she had nightmares. 3 more days of Avery controlling the narrative while he built his counterattack. Friday morning, Lincoln received unexpected news. Detective Walsh from the Springfield Police Department called with an update on Kellen Roach. We arrested him this morning at a motel outside Eugene. Found equipment for multiple surveillance operations and evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy. What kind of evidence? Laptop with detailed plans for targeting your family's communications, financial records, and personal relationships. This wasn't just about the custody battle. He was planning long-term destruction of your reputation and livelihood. Federal charges, multiple felonies. The modified military equipment alone is worth 5 years. Add conspiracy, fraud, and illegal surveillance. He's looking at serious prison time. What about Avery? That depends on how much she cooperated with his schemes. We're reviewing communications between them to determine her level of involvement. Lincoln felt the first real hope he'd experienced since being served with a restraining order. If Kellen was in federal custody and Dr. Chun was recanting her evaluation, Avery's case was collapsing, but he still had to prove it in court. Monday morning, Lincoln met Martinez at the courthouse 2 hours before the hearing. She'd spent the weekend preparing their comprehensive response to Avery's emergency motion. We're filing a counter motion requesting immediate return of custody, criminal investigation of fraud, and sanctions against opposing counsel for filing knowingly false documents. How strong is our case? Stronger than I've ever seen in a family court fraud case. The evidence is overwhelming and independently corroborated. At 9 a.m., they walked into Judge Patricia Hendricks' courtroom. Judge Hendricks was a veteran family court judge with 25 years of experience and a reputation for thorough case analysis and zero tolerance for fraudulent proceedings. Avery was already seated with her attorney, David Chun, looking confident and composed. She wore a conservative navy dress and minimal makeup, projecting the image of a concerned mother protecting her vulnerable child. Her performance was flawless, but Lincoln now recognized the calculation behind every expression. Judge Hendricks called the hearing to order at 9:30 a.m. sharp. I've reviewed the emergency motion filed by Mrs. Ray's counsel and the counter motion filed by Mr. Ray's counsel. These are serious and contradictory allegations. Mrs. Ray, explain to me why you believe your daughter is in danger from her father. Avery's attorney presented their case methodically. Dr. Chin's psychiatric evaluation describing Myra's alleged trauma symptoms. Audio recordings supposedly demonstrating Lincoln's emotional abuse. Judith Caldwell's sworn statement about witnessing concerning behavior. Judge Hendricks listened without interrupting, taking detailed notes and asking occasional clarifying questions. Mr. Ray, how do you respond to these allegations? Martinez stood. Your Honor, we deny all allegations and present evidence that Mrs. Ray has engaged in systematic criminal fraud to manufacture a false case against her husband. Those are serious counter-allegations. Counsel, we have substantial documentation, Your Honor. Martinez presented their evidence in a carefully orchestrated sequence designed for maximum impact. She started with the police report about the surveillance device found in Myra's ear, establishing criminal endangerment of the child. Judge Hendricks examined the medical report and police documentation. Mrs. Ray, how do you explain the presence of an electronic surveillance device in your daughter's ear canal? I have no knowledge of any device, Your Honor. This is the first I'm hearing about it. Martinez handed the judge transcripts of recorded conversations between Avery and Kellen Roach discussing the surveillance operation. Your Honor, Mrs. Ray coordinated with Kellen Roach, a dishonorably discharged former military specialist, to insert recording equipment into her daughter's ear and use the recordings in this custody proceeding. Judge Hendricks read the transcripts carefully. Mrs. Ray, these appear to be records of conversations where you discuss payment for surveillance services and editing recordings for legal purposes. Avery looked panicked. I don't know how those records were obtained or if they're authentic. Martinez presented Dr. Chin's affidavit next. Your Honor, the psychiatrist who evaluated the child has now admitted that her assessment was based on falsified evidence and coached responses. Judge Hendricks read Dr. Chin's statement twice. Dr. Chin states here that she was pressured to reach predetermined conclusions regardless of clinical evidence. Mrs. Ray, do you have any explanation for this retraction? Dr. Chin never mentioned any concerns about her evaluation process during our sessions. According to this affidavit, you specifically requested documentation supporting abuse claims even when clinical evidence didn't support such conclusions. Martinez played the surveillance footage next. The judge watched Lincoln's hidden camera recordings of Avery coaching Mira to make false statements about her father's behavior. The courtroom was completely silent as Avery's voice filled the room. Remember when a nice doctor asks you about home? What will you tell her? That daddy yells a lot when he thinks no one's home. Judge Hendricks stopped the recording. Mrs. Ray, explain what I just witnessed. I was trying to help Mira express her feelings about difficult family situations by coaching her to make specific false statements about her father's behavior. Those weren't false statements. They reflected Myra's genuine experiences. Martinez presented Marshall's doorbell camera footage showing Mira happily interacting with Lincoln every day for weeks, directly contradicting any claims of fear or trauma. Then came the financial evidence. Bank records showing the fraudulent medical trust fund, payments to Judith Caldwell for non-existent consulting services, and money transfers to legal counsel for fabricating the custody case. Judge Hendricks studied each piece of evidence carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timelines and verification procedures. Finally, Martinez presented the technical analysis linking the surveillance conspiracy to Kellen Roach, including Detective Walsh's report about his arrest and the federal charges he was facing. Your Honor, this was a coordinated criminal operation designed to destroy Mr. Ray's relationship with his daughter through systematic fraud and perjury. Judge Hendricks set down the documents and looked directly at Avery. Mrs. Ray, I find your testimony completely contradicted by the evidence presented. You have knowingly filed false statements with this court, endangered your child's welfare, and engaged in criminal conspiracy to defraud these proceedings. She turned to Lincoln. Mr. Ray, while I'm appalled by your wife's actions, I need assurance that you can provide a stable, safe environment for your daughter. Your Honor, my only goal has been protecting Mira from people who would use her as a weapon in their schemes. The evidence shows I've never exhibited any of the behaviors alleged in the false reports. The evidence strongly supports your position. Emergency full custody is awarded to you, effective immediately. Mrs. Ray, you are prohibited from removing the child from the state. Your visitation will be supervised pending resolution of criminal charges. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel with finality. I'm referring this entire matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. This court will not tolerate systematic fraud designed to manipulate custody proceedings and endanger children. As they left the courtroom, Lincoln could hear Avery crying behind him. But he felt no sympathy for the woman who tried to destroy his relationship with his daughter using lies, criminal conspiracy, and manipulation of a 6-year-old child. Justice had been served, but the emotional damage would take time to heal. That afternoon, Lincoln picked up Mira from school himself for the first time in over a week. She ran across the playground and threw her arms around his waist. Daddy, why haven't you been home? Mommy said you were working on a special project. I was working on something very important. But now I'm back, and we're going to spend lots of time together. Can we read books tonight? As many as you want, sweetheart. As they drove home, Mira chattered about school, her friends, and a drawing she'd made for him. Lincoln listened to every word, grateful for the sound of his daughter's voice and the normalcy of their conversation. That evening, Detective Walsh called with final updates on the criminal cases. Kellen Roach pleaded guilty to federal charges. 4 years in federal prison, plus restitution for damages. Your mother-in-law was arrested this morning. She's cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. What about Avery? She's negotiating a plea deal. Probably gets supervised probation and mandatory parenting classes if she shows genuine remorse and pays restitution. I don't want her around Mira without supervision. Given the evidence, the court will likely require supervised visitation for an extended period. Her actions endangered the child and demonstrated a willingness to manipulate her for personal gain. 2 weeks later, Avery called Lincoln from her attorney's office, asking for a private conversation. Lincoln, please. I didn't want this to go so far. I just wanted to start over with my life. You tried to destroy my life and traumatize our daughter to get what you wanted. I felt trapped in the marriage. I thought I didn't have any other options. So you decided to frame me as an abusive father, conspire with a criminal, and use Mira as a recording device. I never meant for Mira to get hurt. The surveillance device was Mom's idea. I didn't understand how dangerous it was. You knew exactly what you were doing, Avery. You coached our daughter to lie about me. You paid for falsified medical records. You coordinated with Kellen to manufacture evidence. I'm sorry. Can't we work something out? For Myra's sake. Lincoln looked out his office window at the quiet suburban street where he'd once thought he had a stable, happy family life. That illusion had been shattered by the woman who'd promised to love and protect their family. No, Avery, You can't apologize your way out of this. You try to take my child away using criminal conspiracy and psychological manipulation. That doesn't deserve forgiveness. It deserves consequences. Lincoln, please. He hung up without another word. 3 months later, all the criminal cases had been resolved. Kellen Roach was serving 4 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and illegal use of military surveillance equipment. Judith Caldwell received 18 months of supervised probation and was permanently barred from unsupervised contact with Mira. Avery pleaded guilty to child endangerment, perjury, and conspiracy charges. She received 2 years of supervised probation, mandatory psychological counseling, and court-ordered parenting classes. Her visitation with Mira remained supervised and limited to 4 hours per week. Lincoln sold the house in Springfield, unable to live in a place where his family had been systematically betrayed. He found a smaller property on 5 acres outside town, with a fenced yard where Mira could play safely and mature oak trees that provided natural privacy and beauty. The new house had a workshop where Lincoln could work on electronics projects and a music room where Mira practiced guitar twice a week. She'd started lessons as part of her recovery process, and music seemed to help her process the confusion and trauma of the custody battle. Lincoln negotiated a permanent remote work arrangement with his company, allowing him to pick Mira up from school every day and spend afternoons helping with homework, driving to activities, and simply being present in her life. Mira joined a soccer team at her new school and made friends who knew nothing about the custody battle, the surveillance devices, or her mother's crimes. She was simply the quiet girl with the devoted father who never missed a game and always brought the best snacks. One afternoon in late fall, Lincoln sat on their back porch watching Mira practice guitar. The oak leaves were turning golden red, and the air carried the scent of wood smoke from neighbors' fireplaces. For the first time in months, he felt completely peaceful. "Daddy, my teacher says I'm really good at writing stories now." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. What kind of stories do you write?" "Adventure stories about brave kids who solve mysteries and help their families stay safe." Lincoln smiled, amazed by his daughter's resilience and insight. "I'd love to read them sometime. I'm writing one about a girl who helps her dad catch the bad guys who try to hurt their family. The girl is really smart and brave, and she helps solve a mystery." "That sounds like a great story." Mira strummed her guitar thoughtfully, working through a new chord progression her teacher had shown her. "Daddy, yes, sweetheart. Do I get to write my own story now, without anyone else controlling it?" Lincoln looked at his daughter with amazement. At 6 years old, she understood something profound about autonomy, control, and the right to determine her own narrative. "Yes, sweetheart. You get to write your own story now. No one else controls it." He leaned back in his chair and watched the leaves fall from the oak trees. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt completely calm, clear, and free from the manipulation and deception that had nearly destroyed his family. Justice hadn't been begged for or hoped for. It had been built systematically, piece by piece, with evidence, determination, and the absolute refusal to accept lies as truth. Mira continued playing guitar as the sun set behind the oak trees, her music filling the peaceful evening air. She was writing her own story now, and Lincoln would spend the rest of his life making sure no one ever tried to control that narrative again. The sound of deception had been replaced by the sound of truth, healing, and a father and daughter who'd survived the worst kind of betrayal and emerged stronger together.